Why is Africa poor? This is the wrong question. You should be asking, why are the people on the continent of Africa poor? Even though Africa is the richest continent on planet Earth. Africa has resources that the world needs, particularly the industrialized world. It has gas, it has oil, it has timber, it has diamonds, it has uranium, it has platinum, it has gold, it has fish, it has a whole list of resources that the world needs. The USA, Europe, and the other industrialized nations demand Africa's natural resources at the lowest cost and without interruption. So they install governments, or they allow governments to come to power across Africa that will guarantee that the resources will flow into the West at the lowest price and without interruption. Think of Africa as the world's backyard. Africa is a resource colony. It started with the Arabs. They traded for gold, then human beings. The Europeans got in on the act and started kidnapping human beings to sell into slavery in the New World. But by the end of the 19th century, slavery was seen as a bad thing. So they established colonies across Africa. And this was cemented at the 1884 Berlin Conference, where the great powers of Europe divided up Africa in their own interest. Areas were not given their historic African names. They were given names of resources, like the Gold Coast, like the Ivory Coast, like Cameroon, which I think stands for shrimps or something in German. Each part of Africa was given a name designated for its exploitation. The Berlin Conference was a disaster for Africa. The European powers just sliced up Africa in any which way and how, all for their benefit. They sliced up existing communities. So one community had to go with the French and became French. The other community had to go with Britain and became British. Ethnic groups that were historically antagonistic towards each other, who had kept themselves apart, but suddenly found themselves trapped within the same state. The European powers would put one ethnic group above another ethnic group, and then they would be fighting continuously within the same state. Look at Rwanda, for example. Some countries were landlocked. So if British had control of an area, one part of that area was a British colony or protectorate, which was landlocked, couldn't get to the sea. But because Britain had also owned the other piece of that real estate that was next to the sea, then they could get transportation if they needed it. But come independence, why would one coastal state give access to the sea to the landlocked state? You see, and the cost of getting to the coast would be more expensive if there's no railway. system, or if there's no roads built. This is the mess that they left Africa with. The Berlin Conference has a huge amount to do with the disaster that Africa currently faces. The Berlin Conference. Look that up if you want to see the mess that the Europeans caused in Africa. The colonial legacy has left infrastructure that's not fit for a modern society. The roads, the rail, the ports, the major buildings, major institutions were all built and built towards extraction of the natural resources. So outside of the big capital areas, the metropolitan areas, there's very little development. So how can you get economic liftoff if much of the area doesn't have paved roads or an interrail between areas from A to B? You don't have it. Everything's going from, say, the interior where the timber is to the port. Timber to the port. Do you see? From the forest straight to the port. There was nothing on either side. And even today, the investments that the West makes, that China makes, are largely for resource extraction. So this is the main problem that Africa has, is that its infrastructure is not geared towards economic growth. It's geared towards extraction. Extraction without economic growth. The latest economic research shows that the bulk of trade between nations happens locally or regionally. So the bulk of your trade happens locally, happens regionally. So America trades a lot with Mexico. Why? It's its neighbor. America trades a lot with Canada. Why? It's its neighbor. Europe, countries in Europe, France trades a lot with Spain because it's its neighbor. It trades a lot with Germany because it's its neighbor. But that's not the case in Africa. Africa's regional trade or inter-African trade is tiny. This is the legacy of colonialism. And as I've already stated, the governments are put in place or they're allowed to come to power on the basis that they are going to maintain the status quo. Vice News did a documentary recently about one of their journalists traveling from Nigeria to Ghana. It should take roughly 255 miles to travel. Boom. And in Europe, that journey will take roughly 2.5 hours. But in Africa, that journey could take up to 2 weeks. Now, given that Nigeria is a massive population of, nearly 200 million, and Ghana and Ivory Coast, which are next door to each other, you're looking at maybe 50 million there. They're two big economies, two big regional West African economies. The trade between them should be like massive. The roads that connect them should be cleared, should be fast. Like the roads in Germany, the Autobahn, they should be kind of like specialist roads that gets the trade to and from within 2.5 hours, not 2 weeks. But here's the thing. The governments have no interest in inter-Africa trade. Inter-Africa trade, there is no interest. So their interest is exporting to the West or exporting to Asia. This is the problem. Africa's growth rates over the last 20, 30 years has been around 3 or 4%. If that, once you exclude Chinese investments and Chinese investments for exports of natural resources going back to China. So the economic pie in Africa is growing very slowly. So politicians and the middle class spend their time trying to capture the state. What some people call state capture. Their job is to capture the state and get the state to deliver resources to their community, to their families, and to their friends. So we do not have politicians in Africa who are interested in the well-being of their people, i.e. the population as a whole. They are only interested in self-preservation. So they see capturing the government as a way of enriching themselves. For Africa to get out of the mess that it's in, it would need to grow like China. China, over the last 30 years, grew at an average of about 10% per year. Africa would need to grow at least 10% a year, or at least 15% a year for the next 20 to 30 years. But there are no politicians on the continent even thinking about this. Their interest is to get hold of the state to benefit themselves. State capture. Now, some people are saying, people on the continent, academics at universities around the world who look at development theory, some are saying that it's all down to corruption. But I ask you, is America not corrupt? Is France not corrupt? Is Britain not corrupt? Is India not corrupt? Is Japan not corrupt? Is China not corrupt? These countries still grow with corruption. Why? They grow because they have a class of people who want their societies to progress. Once African countries have a balance of payment event or crisis, the IMF is called in. And the IMF delivers what you might call the Washington Consensus under their structural adjustment programs. They might give them new names because structural adjustment programs were deemed as really bad and evil, in fact. So they might have a new name for them, maybe austerity or something like that. So the Washington Consensus is simple. What the IMF wants is the money back that is lent the government. So it demands the government to cut public services like healthcare, education, anything that will improve or maintain the human capital. It then gets the government to remove tariffs on imports. It gets the government to devalue its currency. And then it orders the government to put more investment into extractive industries. That's if it has them. And then it exports aggressively at a low cost, or because they've devalued the currency, it makes their exports, particularly of natural resources, much cheaper for people to buy. So copper, for example, Zambia is big in copper. So copper prices are cut, so more copper is then demanded, and therefore Zambia can make its money to pay back its debt. Now, it does this across the board. It's a standard model. But what this does is it kind of like retards the economy. So the economy struggles to grow. So, for example, if you devalue a country's currency, it means that exports are cheaper and imports are more expensive. So if somebody is trying to set up a factory, try to move into small scale, light scale manufacturing, any capital equipment that is trying to buy in from abroad is going to be more expensive. Do you see? So if you buy anything from Germany, and Germany is the powerhouse for manufacturing, you're going to have to find the more euro, but you're working with the local currency. So you're going to have to give up more of the local currency to get the euro. So development in terms of industrialization is then weak, because unless you get foreign direct investment coming in and then actually bringing in the euro or the dollar denominated investment comes in, and they buy the machinery, and then they put the workers to work, and then you can have industrialization. But if you're not being what they call attractive to outside investors, then you're not getting that investment in. So you basically retard the economy, and this is what's happening. The economies are not growing outside of the extractive industries because they lack capital investment. So therefore, you have a greater informal market. People working in the informal sector, where there's no employment standards, and there's very low environmental standards, consumer standards. So it's kind of like the Wild West, and that's what they put Africa into, like an experiment to see if the society can survive without direct investment. And that's how they've got Africa, like a Wild West economy. Now, the economic literature shows that if you invest in your agricultural sector, you've got a greater chance of getting economic liftoff. Why? Because you get the cost of reproducing yourself down. So, for example, if you're a worker in the urban centre and one of the wage goods is actually food, you need the cost of food to be low. So if you industrialise or modernise your agricultural sector, you get the yield of the crops going up. You get the yield up. The farmer makes more money because the yield has gone up. The worker in the urban centre gets the chance of eating food which is plentiful, but also the price comes down because there's a greater supply of food in the market, which then brings down the price, and therefore the worker can reproduce themselves, what you might call the wage good. So at the end of the day, end of the week, they've worked a full day, a full week. There was enough money for them to buy food for themselves and their family. And the farmer can do the same. Because the yield has gone up, they're getting, they might not be getting the same price for a small amount of the harvest. But if the harvest is bigger, they're then getting more money, you see. So if they're selling, say, 2 sacks of rice, 10k sacks of rice, and they're getting, I don't know, let's say, for example, $10 for a sack of rice, for 2 sacks. So $10 each. If they increase their yield, instead of producing 2 sacks of rice, they produce 5 sacks of rice. Then they might not get $10 per sack of rice, they might get $8, but they'll get $8 for 5 sacks. So they're making $40 instead of $20. You see, so then that can then help them develop, invest in their children, invest in new equipment, invest in new seeds, in new methods of production. And this is how you lift your economy, by investing in agriculture. Well, the IMF says that's a waste of time. They say if the urban worker needs low-cost food, then import the food from overseas. Import it from more efficient farmers. More efficient farmers you find in Europe, in Japan, in America, in Canada, in Australia, in China. You see, import from overseas. But why are they more efficient than low-cost agricultural workers on the continent of Africa? Because nearly in all these places, they receive large amounts of taxpayers' subsidy. But the IMF say, you as a poor country in Africa are in no business subsidizing your farming sector. So remove all farming subsidies and allow the farmers to survive in the free market. So there is no money to invest in agriculture in Africa, but there's money to invest in agriculture overseas. So they remove any tariffs on imports of food products, and now Africa is a net importer of food. It imports $40 billion a year in food, although 70% of Africa's population lives in the rural areas, lives on, makes their living from agriculture. So they might work in the urban area, but they might go into an agricultural area to work. So how is it that the bulk of Africa's employment is in agriculture, but they still have to import $40 billion worth of food? That's how they've been set up to fail. Africa's population is growing. The UN estimates that Africa's population will double by 2050. But the problem that they're having is that the population is growing and going up, but the economy is like that. It's slow or stagnant. So there's something wrong, because if you have a growing population, you should have a growing economy. The two should go together like that. So there is something wrong. Now, this is why Africa is becoming poor, or is poor, is because the population is outpacing economic growth. In other words, there's more mouths to feed, but the bowl is not increased. So there's not enough to go around. So that's why you're getting greater amounts of poverty, greater amounts of hunger. You have more people, more children not in school on the continent of Africa than you have in Asia, because there's no money to provide the schools, no money to pay for the school teachers, no money to pay for books, no money to pay for the buildings. So population growth without good governance or without a proper economic model is then retarding. It's slowing. You see, it's slowing Africa's growth, economic growth, because the population is outpacing the speed of the economy. Africans who have gained high-level qualification and skills try their very best to leave Africa, to escape from Africa. You have 7,000 practicing doctors from Nigeria in the UK. You have about 5,000 in the USA. But there was only 35,000 practicing doctors in the whole of Nigeria. The population of Nigeria is approximately 200 million. Now, on the best ratio, doctor to population ratio, Nigeria needs in excess of 300,000 practicing doctors, not 35,000. And when you look throughout all the sectors, you'll find that they're highly skilled, they're highly trained, and those with all the qualifications, many of them have left the continent of Africa and are in Europe. They're in the USA. They're in Canada. Some are even in Australia. So you cannot get economic growth if you're highly skilled are leaving the continent. So it's costing you more to replace them each and every time, but also they're not staying in the continent to let the continent get value from their expertise. They're taking their expertise out. This is one of the key problems that Africa is facing, what they call the brain drain. Now, there's an impact from climate and climate change happening. Also, Lake Chad is drying up, and 50 million people depend on the lake for their livelihood. So there's going to be a lot of people displaced. There's going to be fighting. There's going to be insecurity as the water runs out. It has an impact on economic growth, economic development. In many parts of Africa now, the heat is intense. How long can you work outdoors without collapsing or needing more water or needing to rest if the heat is extremely hot? This is a real problem. So how many hours can you put in on the farm when the sun is beaming down on you, 40 Celsius and above? And the same is for people who work indoors, who are indoor workers. If there's not sufficient air conditioning, how much work can be done indoors? So there's a productivity problem. There's a productivity gap. And given the lack of capital investment, it's even worse because you don't have the capital equipment and it's extremely hot. So the human being is already not working at their optimal level, and you lack sufficient capital equipment to boost your productivity. This is a key problem why Africa remains poor. But again, as I sum up, it's the people of Africa that are poor. And the reason why they are poor is because the continent is being exploited. And that's the problem. The people are not poor technically, they're exploited. Their environment is exploited. So if you want to help, you should be lobbying your governments in America, in Europe, in Canada. They're the places where these models of extraction were put in place. You need to lobby those places to get this model of extraction removed. Now, is there hope? Absolutely. Africa has a young population. It has a growing population. It has the natural resources it needs for its own industrialization. All it needs is politics. It needs the politics of exploitation to be solved. So if you want to help, get involved in the politics of Africa. Solve the politics of Africa, and Africa can become the next China. Remove these artificial borders that were imposed in the 1884 Berlin Conference. Allow people to live where they wish. So over time, ethnic groups can congregate together. If you feel happier to live within a particular ethnic group, fine. But you're able to trade, you're able to live in security because all the borders have been removed. Anybody can live anywhere and you can live a decent life. That should be the aim. So, that's it. I want to leave you with a question. The question is, will the US and the rest of the world allow Africa to develop on its own terms? Put in the comments below yes or no and give a reason. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching this video from the Warrior for Power. Do me a big favor and subscribe to the channel below on YouTube and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss another upload from the Warrior for Power. And also like the video. All this helps to get the video to other viewers, people who want to be involved in the total, radical transformation of the lives of African people on planet Earth.